By Sefer Misvot Rambam, yesterday we went through the first four Misvot Aseh, and we ended off, the first three. We ended up with the Misvah of Havat Hashem. We spoke about believing in a God, and then believing that that God is one, Yehud Hashem, and then Havat Hashem, Misvah, loving Hashem. So up to Misvah Daled, Misvah number 4. So this is another type of mindset that he says to believe, or really to react to the existence of Hashem with fear. He says not to be like those who are literally deniers, could call almost heretics, who exist in this world based on their own, their own de'ot, their own knowledge, their own mindset, carefree and or arrogant, happenstance, and in other words, without really feeling the yoke of a God over them. No fear. Don't be like that mindset. Number one, fear number one, and the simple fear you can say is fearing is punishment. In other words, knowing, being conscious that there's a God, and feeling at all times that you're accountable for the things that you do. Everyone pays the piper, as they say. There will be punishment for wrongdoings in front of your God. Vizehu amaro, the source of the Torah for this mitzvah is Et Adonai Elohecha Tira, fear God. Now, he's going to go on to bring you from the Gemara Sanhedrin to prove. How do you prove that fearing Hashem, Yirat Hashem, is mitzvah aseh, positive or negative? Maybe it's just a negative. Don't not fear him. In other words, don't act arrogantly or carefree. Here's the proof. Amru al derech vikuah. There was an exchange in the Gemara. Be'omra, they took the pasuk v'nokev shem Hashem mot yumat. It's the prohibition of cursing God. V'imar perash dichtiv asher nekebu b'shemot. And then they said in the Gemara, wait, perhaps, and they made a suggestion from another pasuk, and we'll see what that is in a moment. Rambam will explain. Asher nekebu b'shemot. They brought another pasuk that has the same shoresh root as the word v'nokev, which was used to curse Hashem. Ve'azhartiha min et Adonai Elohecha tira. And they said the warning is from the other pasuk of fearing God. Let's unravel all this, says the Rambam. Ulai amru, their suggestion in the Gemara was, Ulai amru v'nokev shem Hashem. When they said whoever curses God will die, Hashem levad maybe they meant not cursing. Maybe they were told the pasuk was referring to just mentioning the name of God in vain, without a curse. Yevarech means curse. V'im tomar, and the Gemara then went on to say, V'im tomar eze avon bazeh. Well, what sin is that? In that case, and the Gemara suggested, Nomar ki hu azav et hayirah. Maybe it's because he abandoned the mindset of fear, and that's why he's mentioning God's name. He has no respect, no fear, no consciousness. Because don't forget, if you really are conscious of and fear God, you won't mention his name for nothing. And maybe that's the entire intent of the pasuk. The Gemara suggested. The Gemara answered on that question. And we rejected that notion. Number one, in order to transgress on this Avirah, it has to be what's called Shem B'Shem, the name with the name. Cursing God in God's name. As a mashal. In other words, they rejected the notion that it's possible to curse, to be violating the Avirah of cursing Hashem's name with just saying his name, because in order to violate it, we know through tradition that you're using God's name, His explicit name, and then that you're cursing. Without that ingredient, it doesn't work. Ve'od, and the second thing they said, azharat asehi, v'chol azhara aseh lo sheme azhara. And also, you wanted to bring a proof from the pasuk, et Hashem Elokecha tira, and that is going to be the proof. You must fear God. That it's referring to just mentioning His name in vain. They said, "Oh, what are you talking about? That's not a law ta'aseh. It's not a negative command. It's a positive command. V'rasur lomar shezeh she'amarta is haratiha me'et Hashem Elohecha tira eno azhara." When the Gemara's answer is, you suggested that the warning to the Avirah of mentioning God's name without cursing is, and you must fear God. That's not a warning pasuk. Ki sivui, that's a positive pasuk. Misvot aseh, ven mazrim ba'aseh. That's a positive, and you don't warn somebody about an Avirah using a positive. What's the net result from this whole exchange in the Gemara? Why is the Rambam bringing it? He's going to tell us. Now it should be clear to you, if you take that piece out of that exchange, Ki amarot Adonai roecha tira zo misvot aseh. From that conversation in the Gemara, what we can extrapolate for sure is that phrase of "and you must fear God" is not a misvat lo ta'aseh, rather is misvat aseh. And now we know that definitely is the source for fearing God. Et Hashem roecha tira. Next, Misvah number 5. The Misvah is to worship God. What does that mean? There's many mentionings of this command in different forms in Pesukim. For instance, and you must worship God. And Him you must worship. So you see there's multiple commands of this idea. Now, the truth is, the Rambam says, if you think about it, this command is more of a general idea. It's a general concept, not a specific command. And one of the 14 principles that the Rambam uses to determine what's a mizvah or not, he says something that's kelali, general, is not counted as a specific mizvah. And isn't this term worshiping God, doesn't that sound more all encompassing and general and referring to numerous other commands? So why are we calling it a specific command, even though Torah says a number of times ta'abodu va'abadetem, worship Him, but that maybe is more of a general concept, and maybe there are other specifics that fit under the umbrella of worshiping. So he's questioning himself. There is a specific within this umbrella. Hu sivui l'tfilah. The Rambam's source to the Misvah from the Torah, according to the Rambam, of prayer, tefillah, is this word, this pasuk, or this command of worship. Elsewhere in Mishneh Torah, the Rambam uses that specific pasuk as a source for prayer. Ulashon Sefer ulovdo zot tefillah. The Midrash Halakha, the Sefer, the pasuk from Kriyat Shema, that's prayer, says the Midrash. They also mention that has to be studied. You learn from that also. They're one of the Tanaim. Yes, rhetorically, how do we know that the idea of prayer is one of the Misvot? And Him you must worship. That is the source, again, from the Midrash of Tefillah. And they said that terminology, avaduhu, worshiping, both refers to limud Torah and service in the Bet HaMikdash. Rasul Amar hichaven elav hitpalel sham, meaning not necessarily korbanot or other services, but focus yourself to pray there, maybe to pray towards there, pray in its confines. So now, this is the Rambam's opinion, that prayer at least once a day is Misvot Aseh from the Torah. Famous argument here that Ramban, who on the sides of my book, and famously everyone knows that Ramban, there's many arguments with the Rambam on this Misvot, and he fears that prayer is only the Rabbanah. Anyway, for the most part, we follow the Rambam on this Misvot. Let's do one more Misvah Vav, Misvah number 6. To partner with, to gravitate towards, and to be around Hachamim. And the presence of Hachamim is a Mizvat Aseh, the Rambam says, in all manners of serving, so to speak, a Hacham, whether it's actual commerce, whether it's just eating and drinking, so that we can eventually learn from them and be affected from them, and then mimic their ways, and to believe in what they're conveying, which is the Torah. How do we know this? The pasuk says, and you must cling to him, cling to God. It's also mentioned in that term in the Torah, and to cling to him. And the Midrash Halakha says, it means cling to Hachamim, to Tamid Hakam. And by the way, so they learn this, of course, because it's possible to cling to God. So it must be cling to those who observe God, emulate God, know God's Torah, master the intellect of God. That's who it's referring to when it says cling to Hachamim. Okay, so they learned from the phrase some laws. For instance, a person must try to marry his daughter off, to marry himself, to the daughter of a Tamid Hakam. Also, to support a Tamid Hakam, to feed him, also to find a work for him. All that is from Bot Bach, and cling to him, the Mizvah of being in the presence and emulating a Tamid Hakam. So you see that servicing him, trying to be related to him, helping him out, is all within that Mizvah. They said rhetorically, can a person cling to God? God's a devouring fire. Rather, it's trying to tell us, whether you marry your daughter off to a Tamid Hakam, whether you marry the daughter of a Tamid Hakam, or whether Tamid Hakam derives benefit from your property, from your money, the Torah considers as if you clung to God. So Udob Kabo and all those other phraseologies of clinging to God really means to cling to Tamid Hakam, and an extension of that, a branch of that, is really servicing and aiding a Tamid Hakam, because all that has to do with you being around him and learning from him, and of course perpetuating their existence and allowing them to serve the Am Yisrael in the community. Amen.